It's been 30 years since the Nigerian military government annulled the June 12th presidential election, denying the winner, Chief Moshood Abiola, his mandate and cracking down on the pro-democracy protests that followed. That day, June 12th, which is of course today, has become a symbol of the democratic aspirations of Nigerians and has been immortalized forever as Democracy Day. Chief Abiola died in jail, still believing he was Nigeria's rightful ruler. Today, Nigerians remember the inexplicable annulment of the country's freest and fairest election and celebrate the handover of power from the military to civilians in 1999 when civil liberties were restored. Joining us now from Abuja studio is Jamiu Abiola, MKO Abiola and Kudirat Abiola's son. Good morning, Jamiu. Good to have you on the morning show.
Good morning. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Well, quickly, straight to the point. Today is June 12th. What does it mean to you? How do you feel about it? And what's your reaction to the president's speech this morning?
Well, June 12th means a lot to me, and it's like a roller coaster. It keeps going up and down, up and down. When it happened, I was just 17 years old, and of course, I was a teenager, very, very excited that my father was going to win the election. And the day of the election, the night, he was hungry. He came to my mother's apartment, downstairs, and he was like, he wants to eat. She was tired, so she just made his food for him and, gave him his food.
Hello?
He just laughed and he said, well, I'm going to win. He was so optimistic. We were all so happy. The following day, the election took place. We were happy as well when the results started trickling in and we knew he was coasting towards victory. Then when it now happened and it was annulled, then the election, drama started. So it went up, it went down. But the lowest part of everything was after he was locked up and after my mother decided she's going to fight till the end. And of course, at that time when he was arrested, I was just 18. So it was so emotional because I didn't want to lose my mom. And this was after Ken Saro-Wiwa was killed, after Pa Rwani was killed. So I was telling her all the time that if you want to fight, come to America, come and stay with us, and you can fight from here. But she said no, she's not going anywhere. So at the end of the day, I just woke up one day and I bought the New York Times in New York, and I saw that she would been arrested and she might be given 8 years imprisonment. And I did not even know why she was arrested. I didn't even know she was arrested. So I called her up. Luckily for me, she had been released. And I asked her that, what happened? She said, well, focus on your studies. It's none of your business. I was like, no, you have to tell me what happened. And she was really, telling me that it's none of my business. It was after a couple of weeks that she now got killed. So that was the lowest part of the struggle when she got killed. Then I came back and I tried to see my dad. And I saw General Dia. He told me that he couldn't be of help. I was in Abuja for a month. I couldn't see him. So I was forced to leave the country when I got a phone call in which I was threatened that they told me that I should leave or something is going to happen to me. So I left the country after waiting in Nigeria for 2.5 months. This was the lowest part of the whole struggle. Till the city of New York now named the corner by the Nigerian embassy after my mom. So that was another uplifting point. Then everything now, went down again. When 1999, there was a Democratic president and he refused to honor or even mention June 12th, as if it was a figment of our imagination. And this went on and on for so many years. But of course, people like the current president were always recognizing my mom. People like Chief Oshoba, and of course, President Tinubu, Chief Bisi Akonde, he also immortalized her. Even the late Pa Adefarati, who was the governor of Ondo State, the AD governors, they kept remembering her. People like Professor Wole Soyinka. So it kept going up and down. At one point, I got so frustrated, I now wrote a book called The President Who Never Ruled. And I said, I'm going to use this book and I'm going to remind people on why they have to honor my dad. And I gave the book copies to so many people. And of course, nothing happened. Then I now wrote this one as well, a second version of the book, called The Stolen Presidency, put them on Amazon so that people can know and remember. As luck will have it, the former president, President Muhammad Buhari, honored my dad. And, I was also very happy, but I wasn't happy that my mother wasn't honored on the day my dad was honored. But a couple of months later, they now, put my mother in the Women Hall of Fame as a matter of democracy. And I was happy that at least he corrected, because she actually fought and led the struggle after, he was locked up. And I commend the current president, President, Tinubu, because he was always fighting for June 12th. And when I met him in his house in America and I saw Pa Adesanya, who had been arrested for my mother's death and so many things, the president has been coordinating from the background. So June 12th has been going up, going down, and I'm very happy that at least now it makes a lot of sense to me that one of the people and the most loyal person that fought for June 12th has now become the president. And when I heard his speech today and what he said, he mentioned my dad, he mentioned my mom. That means so much to me, because a lot of people, like now, the former president, Buhari, who actually honored June 12th, whenever he does his June 12th speech, he never even mentions my dad in most cases. And that was very painful to me, because I was like, you honored June 12th, but you can't even mention the hero of June 12th. You are giving your presidential speech. But you can see the difference with President Tinubu. He's been mentioning my dad throughout the speech. He's trying to connect the historic victory to what is happening now and how we want to get Nigeria out of the trenches. This is a very good thing. So I'm very, very happy today. Very, very happy.
All right. Mr. Abiola, it's great to hear that you are quite satisfied with the president's speech. But in an earlier interview, just to talk about honoring your dad, because as it's often said, today, June 12, he's a symbol of democracy alongside the other martyrs who lost their lives in the course of the struggle. What else would you want the president to do to honor your dad? Because you mentioned that despite the posthumous national honors of the GCFR, usually bestowed on presidents or former presidents, nothing else happened. So the other things that would usually be done for previous president, perhaps you talk about maintenance of your home, some entitlement. Now that we have a new president who, like you mentioned, has been quite supportive to your family, what are you looking forward to immortalize your father?
Yes, you know that a democratic government is a division of power. There's the judiciary, there's the legislative, and there's the executive. The president is the head of the executive. So what I would like for him to do, is to look at the legal framework on how they can actually take it a step further. Because now it's clear that my father was the president of Nigeria. And also, the chairman of NEC, then it was INEC was NEC, Professor Onwosu wrote a book in which he released the entire results of the election. So I think it would be very good for him to liaise with the National Assembly and liaise with the judiciary so we can know how we can actually put this into a formal perspective. Because thank God, Professor Onwosu wrote that book. Thank God he has finally released the results, which I had hoped he had done in those days. If he had run out of the country, released the results from Cotonou while everything was still on, I think it would have been good. But then, of course, there were a lot of problems then, and the judiciary was probably putting setbacks and all of that. But now, he's written a book, he has all the results, so I think they can explore. I don't know exactly how feasible it is, but it's my wish that they can actually make it formal so that he can be a real president, even posthumously. It's probably going to be the first time this is done in the world, but, as I said, it's the first time to everything, and my father deserves it. He deserves it because nobody knew what he went through. I remember I saw somebody like 2 years ago, and he was telling me that he was working in the security agencies, and at one point, he went to my father's cell, and he saw my father was writing, "I'm the president of Nigeria, I'm the president of Nigeria," all over the world. So if it's true that my father was doing that, it must mean that he must have been so lonely I had nothing to do. So I don't know the psychological state of mind he was in. I think it's important for that to happen, for it to go an extra mile, in terms of allowing, him to become more of as much as possible legally, because, I don't know the legal frameworks and what it would entail. But I think that would be good for my father and my mother as well, to, be honored like that.
Okay. Good to see you, Mr. Jamiu Abiola. With all of this, and we've been back to democracy for over 20 years now, I'd like to ask you a question. with all that you see that our politicians have done, knowing fully well that your father fought for this, was it worth it, your father's fight and death, with all the corruption, all the shenanigans, all the needless slapping on the face our politicians do to the people, all the suffering? Was it really worth your father dying?
Okay, you know, if you have a sickness and you go to a hospital, if it's something like a headache, they'll give you Panadol. But when it gets to like a tumor or it gets to malignant cancer, the doctor will try his best, but he will always tell you that it's God that heals. Whenever it comes to addressing issues like what you just mentioned, I always go spiritual, because Nigeria's problem is beyond what the human being can do, what it can achieve. So it's God that can actually, look into it. If you look at a country that has done very well, like look at Great Britain, you look at America, you can actually admire the fact that they've achieved so much. When you look at the history of slavery, the history of, all the injustice that happened, the apartheid or racism, it's always an ugly, way. It's like the way to heaven is full of hardship. So this corruption and all the things you just mentioned now, to me, looking at it from a spiritual angle and a historical angle, I believe it's something that had to happen. It's like a way, it's like somebody that is trying to learn how to do something and not getting his way. For the first time in the history of this Nigeria, we have a president that fought for democracy. He knows what it means to fight for democracy. So he's in a better position to do the right thing. The other people we had, I'm sorry to say this, they were actually fighting against democracy. They gave Abacha legitimacy. They did so many things. So, and like as I said before, I'm being spiritual now. God, might not actually bless something that is actually being, championed by somebody who probably wasn't even on the right side of history. So now we have the right person at the right side of history. He fought in the struggle. He was part of the struggle. He could have sold out. They would have given him a lot of money. And President Bola Tinubu could have sold out. But he said no, and he fought, and he is now the president. So I'm hoping that the same God that allowed him to be president after 30 years, this is so dynamic and it's so spiritual. If you look at it, 30 years, who would have thought it's going to be time for the Southwest? Everybody's doing 8 years. Everything just calculated, everything just worked out to the fact that it's 30 years. And now, is the person that followed my dad to meet General Abacha when he took over to ask, what is the way forward? He's now the same person. Definitely, the same God that created us is the one that made all this possible step by step. So, corruption, was it worth it? We can say that, but when things become good, we will not remember that. So I believe it was worth it, and it's going to be worth it by the grace of God.
Okay, Jamiu, yesterday, a group called the Nadeco Restoration Group issued a statement saying that your dad, Chief MKO Abiola, and President Tinubu share a lot of traits. You've confirmed now that President Tinubu was part of that pro-democracy struggle. And if you look at his speech by the president today, he was talking about restoration of hope. Chief MKO Abiola's slogan then was Hope 93. In 2022-2023, Tinubu's slogan is Restored Hope. Your dad talked about farewell to poverty. President Tinubu this morning was also talking about, running a welfare-oriented government. Do you share the view that both men share the same traits?
Well, everybody has a saying that birds of the same feather flock together. Even the Arabs say it, "Atuyur ala ashkar hataka." Whenever people have something in common, they're actually together. If they don't have anything in common, they cannot stay together. The only time you see people staying together when they don't have anything in common is when there's a personal financial interest. During that struggle, there was no financial interest. People were spending their own money. So if all the people that did not have anything in common with my dad, they deserted him, because, it's like a woman. If you marry to a woman, if she doesn't love you, if you have problems, she's going to leave you. So the fact that he was actually with my dad at the tough times means that they share something in common. And now that, farewell to poverty, he's now talking about how he's going to help in terms of helping the poor and all of that. I was very, very touched by that speech, because he kept connecting everything together. And that is exactly what we wanted. That's exactly what we expected. When Major General Muhammad Buhari honored MKO and he made June 12th the Democracy Day. Whenever he gives his presidential speech, I wake up early in the morning after my prayers. I won't go back to sleep. I'll be watching to see what he will say. And he will not even mention my father once. He wasn't connecting it. He wasn't connecting the fact that that election was an election that the first time in history, people did not care about religion. They did not care about tribe. And at that time, when General Muhammad Buhari was ruling this country, issues of banditry, so many things were everywhere. Everything was about religion, tribe. So many things were going wrong. So all of a sudden, he wasn't mentioning this. He wasn't connecting it to his speeches. It was very discouraging. So this speech, has proven that yes, the current president doesn't just have anything to do with my dad in terms of they have a lot in common in life and in death. And by the grace of God, what my father couldn't achieve by becoming president, he will achieve it. And I know it's going to be difficult because of the way the world is going right now with the war in Ukraine and the fact that the world is a global village. Something happens here, it has an impact over there. But I'm optimistic that God would definitely see him through. To answer your question, they have a lot in common. And by the grace of God, he's going to prove it with actions, by the grace of God.
All right, talking about having a lot in common. Your dad's election, which was 30 years today, June 12, 1993, was adjudged to have been the freest and fairest election. Hence, like you mentioned, religion wasn't even, it didn't come into it. It was one of the most interesting, one of the most exciting, hopeful elections for Nigerians. And so after that happened, international observers from the Commonwealth, international journalists and local journalists said, yes, it was free and fair. How would you compare it to the election that, in the last election where President Tinubu emerged as president? Would you also say that it could be adjudged as being free and fair? Because that's one of the reasons why we celebrate June 12 as Democracy Day. A day where Nigerians went out, even though the turnout wasn't so great in terms of 35%, still went out to exercise their franchise. Would you say it was the same thing that happened this year during the elections?
Well, you know that these elections is different in the sense that we live in different times. This time, we live in a time of fake news. We live in a time of social media. We didn't have to go through that then. So a lot of things that we hear, we also have to be very careful what we believe. And unfortunately for us, we are not in a position to actually know how to know the truth from the falsehood. But one thing I do know is that the election was keenly contested. And I also know that if it wasn't free and fair to a certain level, by now, people would not have accepted the results. Because, if it was rigged and people were so sure of it, we will not have so much peace in this country. Because the police is not going out there clamping on anybody. People have accepted the results. Now, and it was so keenly contested. By the time the results came out, each of the candidates won 12 states. And if it wasn't fair and fair, I don't think each of them would have won 12 states. If it wasn't fair and fair, the issue of Abuja would not have come up. They would have, if they were manipulating everything, they would have manipulated Abuja. I don't believe that Abuja is the one has to win Abuja to become the president of Nigeria. But some people believe that. And if it wasn't fair and fair, the people that were rigging the election and manipulating it would have made sure they manipulated Abuja as well. But so what I'm trying to say is that these issues are in court. We should see what is going to happen at the end of the day. The judiciary is robust. And by the grace of God, as I said, God doesn't do anything halfway. Okay. God cannot take us this far and leave us high and dry. Okay. We've already gone through so much miracles concerning this election. But I don't want to say too much about, the allegations because there's so much fake news flying around. And there's nothing you can do to convince people. If you tell them your opinion, they will not even understand. And they will not want to believe.
Okay. Two things. Is it free and fair to an extent or totally free and fair? I want to clarify that. Secondly, your father was known... hang on a minute. I'll ask you the other one, then you answer. Your father was known to be a man that brought everybody together. Nobody had race or color in front of Chief MKO Abiola. But during the elections, there were divisions. Even recently, the Speaker of the House, the legislature in Lagos, is trying to pass a law for indigenous people. What's your take about the ethnic division that came about from this election? Do you think your father will have been happy about it? And what are you saying? Are you saying the election was free and fair to an extent? Or it was free and fair because people want 12 states each? Is that what you're saying?
Okay. Now, to answer your first question, I'm saying that, to me, my own opinion, I believe the election was free and fair. And the reason why I believe it was free and fair was that if it wasn't free and fair, they would not have had an equal number of people winning in so many. Because at the end of the day, this is a question of opinion. It's like I look at something, I say it's black. Somebody says, no, it looks brown. At the end of the day, it's what you believe. But that's why I'm so glad that there's the arbitration, and the arbitration is going to now decide who is right and who is wrong. So I believe the election was free and fair. Now, the issue of the ethnicity is a very, very big problem. It's a big problem in the sense that people, because ethnicity is fueled by poverty. In most cases, when you see people becoming ethnic, they become like that because they're frustrated. In the recent past, a lot of things have happened that never happened in the world. The issue of COVID-19. So many things have been poverty-induced that people are frustrated. People are not able to meet up with their daily lives or like their daily expectations. So they now start looking at the next person. Look at what happened with Hitler. Before, the people of Germany would never have allowed Hitler to have done what he did. But at that time, before the Second World War, there was a lot of poverty, a lot of unemployment in Germany. So at the end of the day, it was easy for people to just say, yes, these are the enemy, and they start pointing fingers. So I think once we can solve the economic problems of this country, we're going to be able to get people to start rolling back on this ethnicity issue. The issue of the bill you mentioned, I've not heard about it. And I don't want to comment on something I haven't heard about this indigenous bill you just mentioned. I don't want to say anything about what I don't know about. But I know that the ethnicity, that the tribalism is caused by poverty. And I'm hoping that the government really rolls out its plans very soon so that they can tackle poverty.
Mr. Jamiu.
Poverty is like...
Mr. Jamiu. Jamiu, poverty had been hitherto.
Yeah, I can hear you.
If poverty had not been, in 1993, your father would not write a very wonderful manifesto called Farewell to Poverty. But in this election, it was fueled by the political class. It was not a context of poverty. It was a context of a political class fueling ethnicity to be able to win an election after they saw the result of a presidential election. And yes, you have not seen the bill.
My brother,
yes.
I want to say something. I admire your self-confidence and the fact that you are saying what you are saying, with so much confidence. But I also want to remind you that what you are saying is your personal opinion. And you have to, when you say that a political class, I always tell people not to generalize, because when you generalize, you make a lot of mistakes and you actually make, you do things that are not repairable. When you say a political class, everybody is different. Not everybody is going the same way. You can see people in the same party. It doesn't mean that they're all doing the same things. Some people actually have a different view. Maybe some people in the APC are doing what you are saying, but you can't say it's a general policy that we're going to fall ethnicity so we can win an election. I don't like to see people as diabolic, and I always it is something that is a personal opinion that you have, but I also don't believe that people are so evil to actually plan and, for, violence, ethnic violence, so that they can win election. I don't really think, that's my own personal view. And I hope you also admit that what you are saying is your own personal view.
But I have facts to give you. I have facts. If you want facts, I'll give you receipts based on this. That's what makes it fact.
Okay, you see, the facts,
I'll give you receipts.
Might apply to one or two people, but... Okay.
I have receipts for you. If you want, I can give it to you.
From what I know, but from what I know, the president, I'm not a spokesman or anything, but I know that when it comes to reaching out to people, part of the reasons why he was able to actually win this election was because he has been reaching out to people for more than what my dad used to do. My father was always reaching out. My father reached out since 1971. He would tell us, I'm going to Kano for this, I'm going to Kano for that, or Kaduna for this. This man, this current president has been doing the same thing as well. So I think, in terms of if somebody is trying to use ethnicity to divide people, I don't know how, such a person can be reaching out to different people from other parts of the country and still be using ethnicity. But whatever you say, use your view. And of course, I respect everybody's view.
Well, Jamiu, before we let you go, today is national holiday across Nigeria, but it also is something personal for you. What are your plans for the day? Would you like to share that with us?
My plan is to reflect and to pray Because, you know, this world is just vanity, you know. We're here, look, we're having this discussion now. Some people who are talking like 100 years ago, we don't even remember who they are, no matter how important they were back then. So it's all vanity. And even people that have won this election, they have a mandate for the next 4 years if the court doesn't say otherwise. That 4 years to us, they are not ruling. To them, it's going to be like 5 months. So it's vanity. So I always want to use the occasion to tell people to pray hard, reflect hard, and to remember that after these 4 years and the other years you have in life, the longer period is your period outside this world. So they should know that whatever they are doing now is going to have an impact on how they're going to be in those longer periods when they're no longer able to do anything, whether they're going to be punished or whether they're going to be rewarded. So whatever they do, they should always keep in mind that they have to be fair. They have to be honest, they have to be transparent, and they have to keep to the goal. This issue of Nigeria, the reason why we have all these problems is because we claim we are Muslims, we are Christians, but it has to go beyond that. We have to be Muslims and Christians in ourselves when nobody's watching. If we can be honest and we can be truthful, definitely the sky is the limit. So I'm going to pray, I'm going to reflect, I'm going to tell my children more about my parents and I will tell them that by the grace of God, we will all meet in heaven. All of this that we're talking about is just temporary, it's vanity. We should all just come together, say that God has given us this day and everything that's happened has been preordained. And let's put hands together, make the country better. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Abiola. Before we let you go, it will be an opportunity to ask you with regards to your siblings. I know that you've come out to speak and a number of your siblings have also taken on the cause of your father and in some cases, Mrs. Kudirat Abiola's children in her own case. What's the relationship between the Abiola legacy, Abiola children? Do you use this opportunity to work together? How have you been able to fare in building that legacy post 1998?
You know, when this thing happened, this issue of June 12th, this scattered the entire family. As a matter of fact, if not for God's mercy, the fact that you see us as a family is a miracle, because when this kind of thing happens to a family, it destroys them forever and ever. So, you know, most of us, you know, we were not expecting it. So it was a shock. So we're just gradually picking up the broken pieces in our lives, you know, trying to like solve a lot of issues, like the issues of my father's wealth. You know, my father, you know, was a very just man. All his companies, he did not put any of his children in any of the companies. He wanted everything to be equal among the children. But after he died, a lot of fraud was committed and so much bitterness. But at the same time, you know, we are all going to still keep trying in our efforts to come together so that we can keep his legacy well and alive. And by the grace of God, you know, we will not let him down because he was a great man and we cannot afford to let him down. So we meet once in a while, but we are going to try to like double our efforts to become more of a family. We thank God we have a matriarch, Mrs. Adebisi Abiola. She's a fantastic woman. She was always there, you know, when my mother died, not just for me, people of us in the house, even my father's, you know, relatives from Abeokuta, she's always taking care of them, giving them whatever she can. Even when my father was going to come out, she refurbished the whole house, expecting him to come out. And like, of course, he died. So we have her to be guiding us, you know, and we will definitely come out of the woods and we'll make sure that we give him a befitting legacy by the grace of God.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Jamiu Abiola, for your time, and may his memory constantly live and shape Nigeria's democracy. Thank you so much, and sorry for your loss.